Hey everybody, this is No Fixed Course, and today we're going to be painting the battlefield base that we created in a previous video. I won't say the last video because I think I put something up in between, but we built the base, primed it, and now we're going to be doing some painting. So we'll start with Dawnstone. Now, it's a good idea to look at some reference for battlefields because they can be hugely varied depending on the country that they're in, the scenario, or the planet that you want them to be on. For this one, I'm going for a sort of generic urban city kind of look to it. Obviously, if you're in a desert area, you want more orangey, browny dust sort of tones to it. But for this one, lots of greys, lots of concrete, rust tones, things like that, sort of general urban basing. So we've got a base coat of Dawnstone, and then what we'll do is we'll add some shading with Eshin Grey. We'll go around some of the rocks and we'll define some of the shapes. It just gives a little bit extra. Again, as I always say, it's all about layering. You're building up the effect that you want. So start lighter and then go down dark tones and layer washes and things over the top. Always seems to work really well and simulates real life far more than just plonking colours on top of other colours. So get that Eshin Grey into all the cracks, crevices. Leave the larger sections of the rubble alone. If you are going to put any on, just do a little bit, as I've done here, just on some of the edges, just to simulate a bit of shadow. Nothing major, just on some of the corners. Here we go. Right, with that all dry, we'll pick out some of the stones in solid Eshin Grey and we'll do some in Rhinox Hide as well. So just alternate between the two. If you look at your reference pictures of battlefields, there's tons of different colours. So the more different colours you can add in along the sort of browns and grey ranges, and even sort of cream tones as well, just add in as many as you want. I haven't done a huge amount on this one. This is just an example, but just go bananas because you'll find that there'll be far more colours than you expect. If you look at, I think I found some pictures of colorized World War II street, sort of ruined streets from battles and whatnot, and there were just so many more colours than even I had expected. There were bits of wires and all sorts of things just piled up. So yeah, layering. Just using some of that to redefine the shadows as well. And then we'll drop in some Administratum Grey onto the larger sections of rock and rubble. We just want to separate those a little bit more. We'll give them a wash of some Basilican Grey later on, but now you just want to separate them from the rest of the greys. If you see here, I'm adding little sort of scratches and things on there as well. Just adds a bit of texture. Now what we want to do is just highlight, well, I say highlight, paint the skulls white, because we're going to use Skeleton Horde over the top of those, which is a really, really nice bone colour. It's the Citadel contrast paint, and it's probably one of the best ones that they do. Really good for bones, especially with a bit of added highlights afterwards, but I find it works best over very, very pale colours such as white. You could do Screaming Skull, but that kind of darkens it a little bit too much. And we'll also drop it, but not to worry. Now we'll block in anything that's going to be rust coloured with Mournfang brown. So we're going to do the pipes and the razor wire, barbed wire kind of stuff. Want it to look really old. There's also some bits of metal jutting out from a piece of concrete as well. So we'll paint all those in Mournfang brown. Now what we're going to do, we're going to add a layer of thinned Agrax Earthshade. You don't want to go full straight from the pot Agrax on this, because then you'll cover any of the variation that you've already added, and this is part of the sort of layering of the base and of the effect. Is lots of layers of slightly thinned paint and washes and things, and just build it up. Don't go over the rust too much. You simply don't need to, because we're going to be adding thinned paints for the rust effect, and you don't want to darken the Mournfang brown down too much. So one coat of thinned Agrax will do the trick. Don't go over the skulls either is a good point, because obviously we're going over with Skeleton Horde later, so no point in doing two washes. If you do get it anywhere, just wash your brush off, get a bit of water, and you can just push the wash around as long as you're fairly quick. It doesn't dry instantly, but it's if you're fast enough, you can move it around a little bit. Okay, a bit of thinned silicon grey over some of the rocks. Again, it's quite a dark, strong colour, straight from the pot. So don't go straight from the pot. Thin it down a bit, and it'll give you a really nice subtle effect. Obviously, if you're after more of your typical Warhammer style base, then yes, don't thin these washes as much. But we're going for something that's just a touch more realistic. Alright, we'll just add the skeleton horde. Don't thin this, there is no need to thin this. The effect works best if you don't thin it. Some of these contrast paints work far better if you don't thin them. Not all of them, but some of the good ones you can use straight from the pot. Now we're just going to go for a quick, very selective dry brush of Administratum Grey, just to pick out some of the edges. Again, this is very, very subtle, picking out some of the dirt, some of the rocks, and some of the edges of some of the bigger pieces of masonry and rubble and whatnot. Again, if you're looking for more of your typical Warhammer base, go a bit heavy with this. Obviously miss out the skulls and the rusty bits, but you can go a bit heavier on this if you want to. I just quite enjoy the slightly more subtle approach to this. Now we'll start doing some of the rust on the metal parts. So we'll do a wash of Scrag Brown. You want this very thin, because you do want it to pool slightly, because then that simulates how rust actually works. Rain falls on it, the rust particles follow the water and they pool in certain places. It's called a coffee staining effect. So if you're working on a larger piece of sort of rusted metal, and when the paint dries, you get a coffee stain effect around the edges, that's perfect when you're working with rust, because that's what happens. So you get a mix of the coffee staining effect and a sort of faded, smooth effect with real rust on real panels, depending on the age and type of rust. So both effects work really nicely. Also, the rust will pool onto nearby surfaces. So just where any of those metal parts touch the floor, just certain areas, just add a little bit of the wash around. So the edge of the pipe works well. Where the barbed wire touches the ground is also another good one. You can see I do it around some of the around the edge of that pipe in a little bit. And then what we'll do is we'll add some Fire Dragon Bright, which will increase sort of vibrancy of the rust and well, makes it more rust-like. Right, here we go, adding some of the Fire Dragon Bright. Again, thin it so it's sort of a wash consistency. Don't cover all of the Scrag Brown. You want some of that layer showing through. But just dot it all over the place, be quite random. Don't need to have smooth coats or anything like that. what we'll do now is we'll just make those skulls a little bit more defined. We'll just highlight them very slightly with some Screaming Skull. At this bit I just decided to go back in, as mentioned earlier, with some of the rust colours onto the ground, just to simulate where the water sort of dragged the rust off the metal pieces and just onto the ground. So this is quite an old battlefield. A fresh battlefield may not have as much of this, but it's entirely up to you as to what you want to simulate. So now, just so you can get an idea of how it's going to look, because it can look, if you don't paint the base, the edge of the base, it can look a bit washed out to start with. So get the edge of the base painted, ideally in black or a fairly dark colour, and you can really see how the effects sort of really work. You will need a couple of thin layers for that. Now for some finishing touches, this is called a shader from Ammo, which is a MIG product. It's a acrylic-based, almost oil kind of wash. It's really, really good because you can, within sort of an hour or two of placing it down, you can use a wet brush to move it around and and sort of wipe it off sections if you're working with vehicles and whatnot. So it is really good for vehicles, but I quite like it as a little extra certain something for dirt. It doesn't go all over the base. There's no point doing it all over. You just want a few patches here and there for just some extra tones and extra colours and things. They do a lot of these shaders. They're really, really good. They act very similar to panel washes. They don't use capillary action quite as much as an oil paint does, but they're not far off. But you can adjust them like you can with oil paints. But obviously they're acrylic. They do dry very, very shiny, so you will need to put a matte varnish over the top once you're done. But well worth adding to your arsenal there we go. All done. Thank you ever so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, do all the usual stuff, hit the notifications bell and all that jazz, and keep you posted for more tutorials. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.